The early morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of Gila City, Arizona Territory, as Theodora Galloway stumbled forward, her legs weak from hunger and her once beautiful dress now tattered and caked with dirt. 3 days without food had left her dizzy and desperate, her master's cruel punishment for speaking out of turn still not lifted, despite her repeated apologies. She had only asked when the new shipments would arrive, a simple question that had earned her master Wilcox's wrath, and the removal of her food privileges at the general store, where she worked as an indentured servant. The year was 1875, and at 21 years of age, Theodora had already experienced more hardship than most would in a lifetime. Orphaned at 16, she had been forced to sign away 5 years of her life to the demanding shopkeeper after her parents' farm had been foreclosed. Wilcox had proven himself a cruel master, quick to anger and slower still to forgive, using food as his favorite means of control. As she swept the porch of the general store, her vision swam with black spots. She leaned heavily on the broom, trying to remain upright as passers-by averted their eyes, unwilling to interfere with another man's property. In Gila City, a growing town that had sprung up following the brief gold rush of the 1860s, such arrangements were commonplace, and few questioned the treatment of those bound by such contracts. "You missed a spot," came Wilcox's voice from the doorway, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden boards as he stepped out to inspect her work. "And stand up straight. You look like a dying cow." "Yes, sir," Theodora murmured, forcing herself to straighten despite the pain in her empty stomach. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus on the porch boards that seemed to tilt and sway beneath her feet. She did not see the approaching horse until its rider had already dismounted, the jingle of spurs alerting her to his presence. Her eyes traveled upward, taking in worn leather boots, dusty denim pants, and a faded blue shirt before reaching a face weathered by sun and wind but softened by kind eyes the color of a summer sky. "Morning, Wilcox," the man said, his voice deep and calm as he tipped his hat. "Got those supplies you ordered?" "About time, Atwood," Wilcox grumbled, his attention immediately diverted to the wagon that had pulled up behind the rider. "Let's see what you've brought." As the two men walked toward the wagon, Theodora felt her knees finally give way. She sank to the porch, no longer able to pretend its strength. The broom clattered beside her, but she couldn't summon the energy to reach for it. A shadow fell across her face, and she looked up to find the rider Atwood standing before her, concern etched across his features. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, crouching down to her level. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the lie was transparent. His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her pale face. Without another word, he reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in wax paper. He unwrapped it to reveal a thick slice of cornbread. "Here," he said quietly, making sure Wilcox was still occupied with the wagon. "Eat this." Theodora hesitated only for a moment before accepting the offering, her hands trembling as she broke off a small piece and placed it in her mouth. She forced herself to eat slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to devour it whole. "When did you last eat?" the man asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. 3 days ago," she admitted, shame coloring her cheeks. "Mr. Wilcox, he doesn't approve of questions." Something dark flashed across the man's face, but his voice remained gentle. "I'm Cole Atwood. I run deliveries between here and Tucson." "Theodora Galloway," she replied, finishing the last of the cornbread and feeling strength slowly return to her limbs. Cole glanced over his shoulder to where Wilcox was still inspecting the goods. "What is it you desire, Miss Galloway?" he asked softly. "If you could have anything right now, what would it be?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked what she wanted in so long that the concept seemed foreign. Freedom was the first word that sprang to mind, but she dared not voice it. "More time," she finally said. "My indenture ends in 6 months. I just need to survive until then." Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not living, Miss Galloway. That's enduring." He stood as Wilcox turned back toward the store. "I'll be back next week with more supplies. Hold on until then." Before she could respond, Cole had moved away, returning to help unload the supplies as if nothing had happened. Theodora picked up her broom, her hands steadier now. The small act of kindness from the cowboy warming her more than the food itself. True to his word, Cole returned the following week. This time, he arrived as Theodora was hauling water from the well behind the store, her arms straining with each bucket. "Let me help you with that," he said, appearing suddenly at her side and taking the heavy bucket from her hands. "Thank you, but Mr. Wilcox doesn't like—" "Wilcox is occupied with the sheriff right now," Cole interrupted with a small smile. "Something about taxes. We have a few minutes." He set the bucket down and reached into his pocket, producing a small bundle wrapped in a clean handkerchief. "I brought you something." Inside was a portion of jerky and dried apples. "It's not much, but it'll keep," he explained. "Hide it somewhere safe." "Why are you helping me?" Theodora asked, quickly tucking the food into the pocket of her apron. Cole's expression grew serious. "Because no one should be treated the way he treats you." "Are there others?" Theodora shook her head. "Just me. The other girl, Mary, finished her contract last month. Mr. Wilcox hasn't found a replacement yet." "Good," Cole said, lifting the water bucket once more. "Now, where does this need to go?" For the next few weeks, Cole appeared regularly, always finding a moment to slip Theodora food and check on her condition. Sometimes it was only a minute or two while Wilcox was distracted, but each time he asked the same question. "What do you desire, Theodora?" Her answers varied: a book to read, a day without chores, a hot bath, simple wishes that revealed how little she had come to expect from life. Cole listened to each one as if they were the most important words he'd ever heard. On his 4th visit, he pressed a small book of poetry into her hands. "You mentioned wanting something to read," he said, his fingers lingering against hers for a moment longer than necessary. Theodora held the book to her chest, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I'll have to hide it," she whispered. "He doesn't allow me such luxuries." "Then hide it well," Cole replied, his blue eyes intense. "Everyone deserves beauty in their life, Theodora." That night, by the dim light of a candle stub she'd salvaged from the trash, Theodora read the poems, savoring each word like the precious gift it was. She fell asleep with the book tucked beneath her thin mattress, dreaming not of freedom but of the cowboy with kind eyes who had remembered her simple wish. As spring turned to summer, Theodora found herself looking forward to Cole's visits with an anticipation that went beyond the food he brought. He always took time to talk with her, to ask about her day, to make her laugh with stories from his travels. In those brief moments, she felt like a person again, not just property to be used and disciplined. One sweltering July afternoon, as Theodora was sweeping the store after closing, the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, startled to see Cole entering, his expression grim. "Mr. Atwood," she greeted him formally, aware that Wilcox was in the back room doing inventory. "We weren't expecting a delivery today." "I need to speak with you," he said, his voice unusually tense. "Privately." Theodora glanced nervously toward the back of the store. "I can't leave. It's important, Theodora, please." Something in his tone made her nod. She set the broom aside and followed him onto the porch, keeping close to the door in case Wilcox called for her. "What is it?" she asked, noticing the way Cole's hands kept clenching and unclenching at his sides. I overheard something in Tucson, he said, lowering his voice. Wilcox is planning to sell your contract to a man named Gage before your term is up, a mine owner from New Mexico. Fear gripped Theodora's heart. He can't do that. My contract specifies I'm to work here in the store. There's a clause that allows for transfer if the new owner pays a premium, Cole explained, his expression darkening. And Gage is willing to pay triple what you're worth to Wilcox. But why? I don't understand. Cole's jaw tightened. Gage runs the kitchens at his mining camp. The last 3 girls he bought didn't survive the year, the conditions there. He shook his head, unable to continue. Panic rose in Theodora's chest. When is this happening? 2 weeks from now. Gage is coming to inspect the merchandise. Cole spat the last word as if it tasted foul. We have to get you out of here before then. Theodora repeated, hope and fear warring within her. I'm not leaving you to that fate, Cole said firmly. I have a plan, but I need to know if you trust me. Theodora didn't hesitate. I do. Good. I'll be back in 3 days with everything we need. Be ready to leave at nightfall. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Pack only what you can carry in one small bundle, nothing that would be missed immediately. Cole, she whispered, his name feeling intimate on her lips. What I desire now is freedom, but I don't want you risking yourself for me. If Wilcox discovers what you've done, let me worry about that, he interrupted, his hand dropping back to his side as the door behind them creaked open. Miss Galloway, came Wilcox's sharp voice, I don't pay you to socialize. Yes, sir, she replied automatically, keeping her eyes downcast. Mr. Atwood was just asking about an order. And I was just leaving, Cole added smoothly, tipping his hat to Wilcox. Good day to you both. As he walked away, Theodora felt both terror and exhilaration coursing through her veins. In 3 days, she would either be free or face consequences more severe than hunger. Yet despite the risk, all she could think about was the way Cole had said, we, and the gentle touch of his fingers against her cheek. The next 3 days passed with excruciating slowness. Theodora went about her duties with mechanical precision, careful not to give Wilcox any reason for suspicion. At night, she quietly gathered her meager possessions, the book of poetry from Cole, a small locket containing a lock of her mother's hair, an extra dress, and the few coins she had managed to hide away over the years. On the 3rd night, she lay fully dressed on her narrow cot in the storeroom that served as her quarters, listening to the sounds of the store settling in the darkness. Wilcox had retired to his rooms above the shop hours ago, and the town had grown quiet as midnight approached. A soft tap at the small window made her heart leap into her throat. She rose silently and peered out to see Cole's shadowed face. With trembling fingers, she unlatched the window and pushed it open. "Are you ready?" he whispered, his eyes scanning her face. Theodora nodded, passing him her small bundle before climbing through the window, wincing as the frame creaked beneath her weight. Cole's strong hands caught her waist, steadying her as her feet touched the ground. "This way," he murmured, leading her toward where 2 horses waited in the shadows of a nearby alley. "We need to be well away from town before sunrise." "Where are we going?" Theodora asked as Cole helped her mount one of the horses, a gentle mare with a white blaze on her forehead. "North, toward the Colorado Territory. I have a friend with a ranch there who can help us," Cole replied, swinging up onto his own horse. "Can you ride?" "My father taught me," she confirmed, gathering the reins with more confidence than she felt. It had been years since she'd sat astride a horse. They set off at a walk, keeping to the back streets until they reached the edge of town. Once past the last buildings, Cole urged his horse into a trot, and Theodora followed suit, the rhythm of hoofbeats matching the pounding of her heart. They rode through the night, stopping only to rest the horses and take sips from Cole's canteen. As the eastern sky began to lighten, Cole led them off the trail into a cluster of rocks and scrub brush that offered some shelter from both the sun and prying eyes. "We'll rest here until evening," he explained, helping Theodora dismount. Her legs trembled beneath her, unused to the long hours of riding. "Wilcox will discover you're gone when you don't appear for morning chores. He'll likely send word to neighboring towns, but we're heading away from his usual trade routes." As Cole unsaddled the horses and spread a blanket in the shade of a large boulder, Theodora noticed for the first time the rifle strapped to his saddle and the revolver at his hip. The reality of what they were doing, what he was risking for her, suddenly hit with full force. "You could be arrested for this," she said softly, sinking down onto the blanket. "Helping an indentured servant escape is a crime." Cole shrugged as he retrieved food from his saddlebags. "Some laws deserve to be broken, Theodora." "Why are you doing this?" she asked, accepting the strip of jerky he offered. "You barely know me." Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was now casting golden light across the desert landscape. "My mother was indentured when she came to this country," he finally said. "The man who held her contract treated her like property, not a person. She died before her term was up, worked to death in his house while I watched, too young to help her." He turned to look at Theodora, his blue eyes intense with emotion. "When I saw how Wilcox was treating you, starving you for speaking out of turn, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Not again." Theodora reached out, her fingers gently touching his sun-browned hand. "I'm sorry about your mother." Cole's hand turned to grasp hers, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Get some sleep, Theodora. We have a long journey ahead." Despite her exhaustion, Theodora found it difficult to sleep, her mind racing with fears and hopes in equal measure. What if they were caught? What if Cole was arrested because of her? And beneath those worries, a quieter question. What would happen between them when she was truly free? She watched Cole through half-closed eyes as he kept vigilant watch, his profile strong against the brightening sky. In the few months she had known him, he had shown her more kindness than she had experienced in years. She had begun to care for him in ways that went beyond gratitude, though she dared not examine those feelings too closely. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and Theodora drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with dreams of pursuit and capture. She woke to Cole's gentle shake as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. "Time to move," he said softly. "How are you feeling?" "Stiff," she admitted, stretching her sore muscles. "But ready." They ate a quick meal of hardtack and dried fruit before saddling the horses and continuing their journey. As darkness fell, Cole led them back to the main trail, explaining that they could make better time on the established path during the night when there was less chance of encountering other travelers. For 5 days, they maintained this pattern, riding by night, hiding by day, pushing northward through increasingly rugged terrain. Cole proved to be a skilled guide, finding water where Theodora saw only parched earth and keeping them on course without a map. They spoke little during their rides, saving conversation for their daylight camps when they could speak without fear of being overheard. It was during these quiet hours that Theodora began to truly know Cole Atwood. She learned that he was 28 years old, born in New York but raised in the West after his father had sought his fortune in the gold fields of California. He had worked as a ranch hand, a miner, and eventually a freighter, carrying goods between settlements throughout the territories. He spoke of his travels with a quiet passion that made Theodora envious of the freedom he had experienced. In turn, she told him of her childhood on a small farm outside of St. Louis, of her parents' dreams for her education cut short by drought and debt, of the day she had signed away her freedom in exchange for the cancellation of her family's obligations after their deaths. Did you have any other family? Cole asked as they sat beside a small, smokeless fire on their sixth night of travel. Anyone who might have taken you in? Theodora shook her head. My mother's family disowned her when she married my father. He was poor, and they had hoped for a better match. My father's parents died before I was born. She poked at the fire with a stick, watching the embers glow. When the bank foreclosed on the farm, I had nowhere to go. The indenture seemed like my only option. And now, Cole asked softly, what will you do when we reach Colorado? It was a question Theodora had asked herself repeatedly during their journey. I don't know, she admitted. Find work, I suppose. I can cook and clean, and I know how to keep accounts from working in the store. You could do more than that, Cole said, his voice warm with conviction. You're intelligent, Theodora. You could teach or perhaps work for a newspaper. She smiled at his confidence in her abilities. Perhaps. What about you? Will you continue your delivery business? A shadow passed over Cole's face. I won't be welcome in Arizona territory after this. Wilcox has connections, and word will spread about what I've done. I'll need to find something else, somewhere new. The thought of parting from Cole once they reached safety brought an unexpected ache to Theodora's heart. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to the quiet strength he exuded, to the small ways he cared for her on their journey. I'm sorry, she whispered, guilt washing over her. I've cost you your livelihood. Don't apologize, Cole replied firmly. I made my choice and I would make it again. His eyes met hers across the fire, their blue depths reflecting the dancing flames. Some things are worth the sacrifice, Theodora. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch, and for a moment she thought he might say more. Instead, he rose to check on the horses, leaving Theodora to wonder if she had imagined the emotion in his voice. On the morning of their 8th day of travel, they crested a ridge to find a small valley spread before them, green with summer growth and dotted with grazing cattle. At the far end stood a cluster of buildings, a ranch house, barn, and several outbuildings. My friend Thomas's ranch, Cole explained as they paused to take in the view. We'll be safe here for a while. Relief flooded through Theodora at the sight of civilization after days in the wilderness. Your friend won't mind harboring fugitives, she asked, only half joking. Cole's mouth quirked in a small smile. Thomas owes me a few favors. Besides, he's no friend of men who abuse their power over others. They rode down into the valley, approaching the ranch at a leisurely pace now that their destination was in sight. As they drew closer, a man emerged from the barn, shading his eyes against the morning sun. He raised a hand in greeting when he recognized Cole. Cole Atwood, as I live and breathe. The man called out, striding forward to meet them. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick beard and eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Didn't expect to see you this far north. Thomas, Cole greeted him, dismounting and clasping the man's hand. Thank you for taking us in. Thomas's eyes moved to Theodora, curiosity evident in his expression. And who might this lovely lady be? Cole helped Theodora down from her horse before making introductions. Thomas Reynolds, this is Miss Theodora Galloway. Theodora, Thomas and I worked the same cattle drive years ago before he settled down to become respectable. Miss Galloway, Thomas said with a small bow that seemed at odds with his rough appearance. Welcome to Willow Creek Ranch. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Reynolds, Theodora replied, smoothing her wrinkled dress self-consciously. After 8 days on the trail, she knew she must look a fright. Let's get you both inside, Thomas said, gesturing toward the house. You look like you could use a proper meal and some rest. My wife will be delighted to have another woman to talk to. Gets lonely out here for her with just me and the ranch hands for company." As they walked toward the house, Thomas fell into step beside Cole, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Trouble following you, possibly," Cole admitted. "I'll explain later." Thomas's wife, Sarah, proved to be a warm, motherly woman who took one look at Theodora's exhausted state and immediately set about making her comfortable. Within an hour, Theodora had been provided with a hot bath, clean clothes borrowed from Sarah, and a hearty meal that left her pleasantly full for the first time in months. While Theodora rested in the small guest room, Cole explained their situation to Thomas and Sarah. Theodora could hear their voices through the thin walls, though not the specific words. The conversation lasted a long time, with occasional exclamations from Sarah that suggested her outrage at Theodora's treatment. When she emerged from the room later that afternoon, feeling refreshed after a few hours of untroubled sleep, she found Sarah alone in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with vigorous movements. "There you are, dear," the older woman said with a smile. "Feeling better?" "Much thank you," Theodora replied, returning the smile. "Where are Cole and Mr. Reynolds?" "Out in the barn discussing men's business," Sarah said with a roll of her eyes. "Which means they're figuring out what to do next." "Cole told us what happened, about that horrid man starving you and trying to sell your contract." Her hands paused in their work, flour dusting her forearms. "No one should be treated that way, dear. You're safe here for as long as you need to stay." Gratitude welled up in Theodora's chest. "You're very kind, both of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay." Sarah waved away her words. "Nonsense. Friends help friends, and any friend of Cole's is a friend of ours." She resumed her kneading, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "He's taken quite a risk for you, you know. Cole's always been a good man, but I've never seen him put himself in jeopardy like this before." Heat rose in Theodora's cheeks. "I told him he shouldn't have done it. If he's caught—" "Oh, I'm not criticizing," Sarah interrupted, her eyes twinkling. "Just making an observation. Cole Atwood has been wandering for years, never settling, never attaching himself to anyone or anything. Until you." Before Theodora could respond to this startling assessment, the back door opened and Cole and Thomas entered, deep in conversation. They fell silent when they noticed Theodora standing there, and Cole's face softened at the sight of her in clean clothes, her hair neatly braided over one shoulder. "You look rested," he said simply, though something in his eyes made her heart beat faster. "Sarah has been very kind," Theodora replied, suddenly aware of the other couple watching their interaction with interest. Thomas cleared his throat. "Well, we've come up with a plan. You're welcome to stay here, Miss Galloway, until we're sure the search has died down. Cole thinks your former employer will eventually give up looking for you once he realizes you've left the territory." "And then?" Theodora asked, looking to Cole. "Then you'll be free to go wherever you choose," Cole said, his expression carefully neutral. "Start a new life." The thought should have filled her with joy, but instead, Theodora felt a strange hollowness at the idea of starting over alone, without Cole beside her. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to the quiet strength he exuded, to the way he always seemed to know what she needed before she asked. "What about you?" she questioned, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "Where will you go?" Cole exchanged a glance with Thomas before answering. "Thomas has offered me work here at least until winter. By then, it should be safe for me to move on." Relief and disappointment mingled in Theodora's chest. Relief that Cole would not be leaving immediately, disappointment that he still planned to go eventually. She nodded, forcing a smile. "That's good news." Later that evening, after dinner, Theodora found herself alone with Cole on the porch of the ranch house. The summer night was warm, filled with the chirping of crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle from the nearby pastures. They sat side by side in wooden rocking chairs, watching as the last colors of sunset faded from the western sky. "Sarah offered me a position as her helper," Theodora said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "She says she could use an extra pair of hands around the house, especially with winter coming." Cole nodded, his profile outlined against the darkening sky. "She mentioned that to me earlier. It would be a good place for you, Theodora. Thomas and Sarah are good people." "Yes," she agreed softly. "They seem to be." She hesitated, then added, "Sarah also said there's a school in the nearest town that needs a teacher. She thinks I might be qualified once I've had some time to recover and study." This made Cole turn to look at her, a smile spreading across his face. "A teacher. That would suit you well. You have a quick mind and a gentle way about you." "It's just a thought," Theodora said, warmed by his approval. "I haven't decided yet." "What is it you truly desire, Theodora?" Cole asked, echoing the question he had first posed to her on that fateful day in Gila City. "Now that you have choices before you, what do you want?" Theodora gazed out at the darkened landscape, considering his question. What did she want? Safety, certainly. Independence. The chance to build a life on her own terms. But as she sat there with Cole beside her, she realized that none of those things would bring her complete happiness if he wasn't part of her future. "I want to belong somewhere," she finally said, choosing her words carefully. "To someone, not as property but as a partner." She turned to face him, gathering her courage. "I thought I wanted freedom above all else, but I've discovered that freedom means little without connection." Cole was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching hers in the fading light. "Are you saying you want to stay here, with Thomas and Sarah?" "No," Theodora whispered, her heart pounding. "I'm saying I want to stay with you, Cole, wherever that might be." The admission hung between them, fragile and momentous. Cole's hands gripped the arms of his rocking chair, his knuckles white with tension. "Theodora," he began, his voice rough with emotion. "You've only just gained your freedom. You shouldn't tie yourself to anyone so quickly, especially not someone who risked everything to save me." She interrupted gently. "Who fed me when I was starving? Who asked me what I desired when everyone else treated me as if I had no right to want anything at all?" Cole stood abruptly, moving to the porch railing and gripping it as he stared out into the darkness. "I'm not a wealthy man. I don't have land or a proper home to offer you. All I have is a reputation that's now tarnished because I helped you escape." Theodora rose as well, moving to stand beside him. "I don't need wealth or land, Cole. I've lived without those things before and survived. What I need is someone who sees me as I truly am and values me for it." She placed her hand lightly on his arm. "Someone like you." Slowly, Cole turned to face her, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Are you sure, Theodora? Truly sure? Because if you're not," she silenced him by rising on her tiptoes and pressing her lips gently to his. It was a brief kiss, innocent and sweet, but it conveyed what words could not: her certainty, her trust, her growing love for this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. When she pulled back, Cole's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if savoring the sensation. When he opened them, the uncertainty was gone, replaced by a tenderness that made Theodora's heart swell. "I've been fighting this since the day I met you," he admitted, his hands coming up to frame her face. "Telling myself it wasn't right, that you deserved better, that you needed time to know your own mind." "I know my mind, Cole Atwood," Theodora said firmly, "and my heart as well." This time, it was Cole who initiated the kiss, drawing her close with a gentleness that belied the strength in his arms. Theodora melted against him, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing since that first day when he had offered her cornbread and asked what she desired. The weeks that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Theodora. For the first time in years, she was treated not as a servant but as a valued guest and friend. Sarah taught her to bake bread and preserve summer vegetables for the coming winter, while Thomas showed her how to ride properly and handle the gentle mare that had carried her from Arizona, now a gift from Cole, who insisted she needed her own horse. Cole himself worked from sunrise to sunset alongside Thomas and the ranch hands, returning each evening with the scent of horses and hay clinging to his clothes and a smile that was reserved solely for Theodora. They spent their evenings on the porch or by the fireplace, talking about their pasts, their hopes for the future, and the growing affection between them. As summer turned to fall, Theodora began to assist the local schoolteacher in the small town 15 miles from the ranch, riding there 3 days a week to gain experience. The children took to her immediately, and the aging teacher, Mrs. Finch, began to speak of retirement and Theodora taking her place. "She says I have a natural gift for it," Theodora told Cole one crisp October evening as they walked along the creek that ran through the ranch property, the trees above them brilliant with autumn color. "She's offered to recommend me to the school board when she steps down next spring." "That's wonderful news," Cole said, his hand warm around hers. "You'll make an excellent teacher." Theodora stopped walking, turning to face him. "But what about you? You said you would move on after winter." "If I accept the teaching position, I would be committed to staying here, at least for a time." Cole's expression grew serious as he took both her hands in his. "There's something I've been meaning to discuss with you, Theodora. Thomas offered me a partnership in the ranch yesterday. A small share, in exchange for my continued work and some capital I have saved." Surprise and delight flooded through Theodora. "A partnership? Cole, that's extraordinary. Does that mean you're considering staying permanently?" "I'm more than considering it," he replied, a smile breaking across his face. "I've accepted his offer. I've been a wanderer for too long, Theodora. It's time I put down roots." Joy bubbled up inside her, but she contained it, needing to be certain. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "You won't regret settling in one place after so many years of freedom," Cole laughed softly, drawing her closer. "Freedom isn't about constant movement, Theodora. It's about choosing your own path." His expression sobered as he gazed down at her. "And I choose you, if you'll have me." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Theodora whispered, hardly daring to hope. In answer, Cole released her hands and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small, worn velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment," he confessed, opening the pouch to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It was my mother's. Before she died, she made me promise to give it only to a woman of true strength and character, someone who would value it not for its modest worth, but for what it represented." He took Theodora's left hand, his own trembling slightly. "Theodora Galloway, when I first met you, you were starving but still standing proud. When I asked what you desired, you spoke not of wealth or comfort but of time and survival. You've shown more courage and dignity in the face of cruelty than anyone I've ever known." He paused, his blue eyes intense with emotion. "I love you, Theodora. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Theodora's eyes, blurring her vision as she nodded vigorously. "Yes," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, Cole, I will marry you." The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made for her. And then Cole was lifting her off her feet, spinning her around in a circle as laughter burst from both of them. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left her breathless, his arms holding her as if he would never let go. "What do you desire now, Mrs. Atwood, to be?" he murmured against her lips. Theodora smiled up at him, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain. "Nothing more than this," she replied honestly. "To love and be loved, to build a life together. That's all I've ever truly wanted." Cole and Theodora were married on a bright December morning in the small church in town, with Thomas standing as best man and Sarah as matron of honor. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with many of the local families attending to witness the union of the new schoolteacher and the newest partner in the Willow Creek Ranch. As they exchanged vows, Theodora thought back to that fateful day in Gila City, when a kind cowboy had fed her cornbread and asked what she desired. She could never have imagined then where that simple act of kindness would lead to freedom, to love, to a future brighter than any she had dared to dream of. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Cole's kiss was a promise of all that was to come, and Theodora knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just freedom but a home in his arms. Thomas and Sarah gifted the newlyweds with a small cabin on the edge of the ranch property, close enough to the main house for convenience, but far enough for privacy. Cole and Theodora spent the winter making it their own, adding curtains to the windows, books to the shelves, and love to every corner. Theodora began her position as the town's teacher in the spring, riding to and from the schoolhouse each day on her mare, while Cole worked alongside Thomas to expand the ranch's operations. Their evenings were spent sharing the day's events over dinner, reading by the fire, or simply enjoying each other's company in the home they had created together. Word eventually reached them that Wilcox had indeed filed charges against Cole for theft of property, meaning Theodora, but the local sheriff, a friend of Thomas's, had conveniently misplaced the warrant. As months passed with no further trouble, they began to believe that the danger had truly passed. In the summer of their first year of marriage, as the wildflowers bloomed across the meadows and the days stretched long and warm, Theodora discovered she was expecting their first child. Cole's reaction to the news was one of stunned joy, his hands trembling as he placed them gently on her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Theodora asked, though his expression had already answered her question. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Cole replied, gathering her carefully into his arms. "What do you desire now, my love? Tell me what you need, and I will move heaven and earth to provide it." Theodora smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Just stay with me," she said simply. "That's all I'll ever need." Their son, James Thomas Atwood, was born the following February on a snowy night with Sarah serving as midwife. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit, crying lustily as he entered the world, and then calming immediately when placed in his father's trembling arms. "He's perfect," Cole whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he carefully transferred their son to Theodora's waiting embrace. "You're both perfect." Life settled into a rhythm of days filled with purpose and nights filled with peace. Theodora continued teaching until their second child was on the way, a daughter they named Elena Sarah, born almost exactly 2 years after her brother. With 2 small children at home, Theodora temporarily set aside her teaching career to focus on her family, though she occasionally tutored students who needed extra help. Cole thrived as a rancher, his natural affinity for horses making him particularly valuable as the ranch expanded its breeding program. His partnership with Thomas grew stronger each year, and by the time James was 5, they had doubled the size of the original operation, hiring additional hands to manage the increased workload. On warm summer evenings, the extended family Cole, Theodora, their children, and Thomas and Sarah, whom the children called uncle and aunt, would gather on the porch of the main house for music and storytelling. Thomas played the fiddle while Sarah sang songs from her youth, and the children danced in the yard, their laughter echoing across the peaceful valley. It was during one such evening, as Theodora watched her husband teaching their son how to clap in rhythm to the music, that she fully realized how far she had come from that desperate young woman starving on a porch in Gila City. The memory of hunger had faded, replaced by the abundance that now filled her life, not just of food and comfort, but of love and purpose and belonging. Cole caught her watching him and smiled, the same smile that had first given her hope years ago. He excused himself from James and crossed to where she sat with Alina sleeping in her arms. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" he asked, sitting beside her and draping his arm around her shoulders. "About the day we met," Theodora replied honestly. "About how you fed me when I was starving and asked what I desired when no one else cared." Cole's expression softened as he remembered. "You looked so proud, even then, refusing to break despite everything he had done to you." "I was broken," Theodora corrected gently. "You just couldn't see it because I had learned to hide it well. You helped me put the pieces back together, Cole. You and this life we've built." He leaned in to kiss her temple, his lips lingering against her skin. "We built it together, Theodora. Every day we build it together." As the years passed, their family continued to grow. A third child, William Cole, joined them when James was 7 and Alina 5, completing their family with his quiet nature and thoughtful ways. The children flourished in the freedom of ranch life, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with age-appropriate chores, and developing the same strong character that defined their parents. Theodora eventually returned to teaching, this time opening a small school on the ranch itself for the children of the workers as well as her own. Cole built her a one-room schoolhouse near their cabin, painting it white with red trim and installing large windows that flooded the space with light. Watching her instruct the children each day, her face animated with passion for learning, he fell in love with her all over again. In their 10th year of marriage, tragedy struck when Thomas was thrown from a horse while checking fence lines in a remote part of the property. He lingered for 3 days before passing peacefully with Sarah and their extended family at his bedside. His last words to Cole were a request to take care of it all, a responsibility Cole accepted with solemn determination. The loss hit them all hard, but Sarah most of all. After the funeral, she announced her intention to move east to live with her sister, unable to remain on the ranch without Thomas. Before leaving, she signed her portion of the ranch over to Cole and Theodora, making them the sole owners of Willow Creek. "Thomas would have wanted this," she told them, her eyes wet but her voice steady. "He loved you both like the children we never had, and he was so proud of what you've accomplished here." The responsibility of running the entire operation was daunting, but Cole and Theodora faced it together, as they had faced every challenge since the day they fled Arizona. They expanded the schoolhouse to accommodate more children, hired additional hands to manage the increasing workload, and established Willow Creek Ranch as one of the most respected breeding operations in the territory. On a warm spring day in their 15th year of marriage, as they stood together on the hillside overlooking their property, Cole wrapped his arms around Theodora from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they watched their children helping the ranch hands with the spring calves. "Are you happy, Theodora?" he asked softly, echoing a question he had asked many times over the years. Theodora leaned back against his solid strength, her hands covering his where they rested on her waist. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied honestly. "Are you?" Cole turned her in his arms, his blue eyes as bright and clear as the day they had met, though now framed by lines that spoke of laughter and years in the sun. "Do you know what I desire now?" he asked instead of answering directly. Theodora smiled, recognizing their old exchange. "What do you desire, Cole Atwood? 50 more years just like these," he said simply. "With you by my side, watching our children grow and perhaps someday our grandchildren too, building this legacy together." He brushed a strand of hair now streaked with the first threads of silver from her face. "That's all I'll ever want or need." "Then you shall have it," Theodora promised, rising on her tiptoes to seal the vow with a kiss. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, they walked hand in hand down the hill toward home, toward the life they had created from the ashes of despair, toward a future still unfolding before them. The path was clear, the journey shared, and in each other's eyes they found the answer to the question that had first brought them together. What do you desire? Love, family, home, freedom, all intertwined, all found in each other's arms.